Okay, enough messing around. Let's just get on with it. Sonic the Hedgehog CD, or Sonic CD to most. The CD being representative of the technology the game used. How fancy. This is a bit of a weird case. So Sonic CD was that Sonic game for years. The one that barely anyone had played, but many considered to be the absolute best of the best. The 2011 re-release of this game changed the conversation big time, as you had people who didn't like the game originally giving it more credit due to the fixes, but you also had a much wider audience having access to the game, and, well, suddenly you didn't hear as many people talking about Sonic CD with praise. You might be wondering which camp I fitted into, and, well, I didn't like this game much at all. It used to frustrate me so much when I was younger to hear people calling this the best Sonic game of all time, because it just wasn't. The game annoyed me in how it differed from the other classic Sonic games. I hated the special stages, I hated the time traveling. I thought the levels were shite, not even on the quality of Sonic 1. I couldn't ever get the best ending no matter how hard I tried, and it just put me off the game so much. I first played this on the Gems collection for context. God, I used to hate that it said Rejoice for Sonic CD on the box. I was a petty bitch, wasn't I? Regardless, you may have noticed that I'm speaking in the past tense here. Well, that's because nowadays, you'll find me being a lot more positive about Sonic CD. You might even hear me singing its praises. This wasn't a sudden change of heart, trust me, this has taken time. But something kept drawing me back in to go for another round, and every time I finished the game, I would like it slightly more and more. Just to be clear, there are still quite a few things I don't like about this game, like quite a few things. But there are ways to get around this nowadays, as there's new versions of the game that sand down the rough edges the original had. So grab your Sega CDs, or just be normal and boot up the remaster. It's time to dive headfirst into Sonic CD.
The development of this game was pretty interesting. So, right, you know how Yuji Naka fucked off to the US to work within the Sega Technical Institute and create Sonic 2? Well, back in Japan, Sega was about to launch its new add-on for the Mega Drive, the Sega CD. The concept was to allow games to be made with features that only arcade games had at the time, and went into development not long after releasing the Mega Drive. However, they didn't even tell Nintendo America about this until mid-1991, just as they were about to launch the bloody thing in Japan. America then got it in 1992, with the UK not getting it till 93, but to be honest, that was probably better for us English folk, as it gave developers time to actually make some games for it. The rest of the world only had a handful of games at launch, which did not help with sales. While early numbers seemed promising, the Sega CD would only go on to sell 2.24 million copies, which, okay, I know many consider it to be a failure, but really it's not that bad for an expansion. And considering Sonic CD sold 1.5 million copies on the thing, that means that like 70% of the install base bought this game. That must be like one of the highest ratios for a game sold on a console ever, right? But yeah, Sega wanted a Sonic game to push units, and really, it was obviously a success, right? Initially, Sonic CD was to be an enhanced port of Sonic 2, but as the Japanese team led by Natao Oshima had a different vision for the project, it soon became its own thing. Developers on Sonic CD didn't receive the same amount of pressure as those over at STI, and Oshima believed this was simply because the game wasn't a numbered title. They also built Sonic CD on top of the original Sonic 1, and it's very obvious. I mean, Sonic's sprite is untouched from the first game. With the more powerful technology on their side, it seems the Japanese team had a far less stressful time when making this game. This didn't stop them from releasing the game without some content left on the cutting room floor though. Once again, entire zones were cut, but very little is known about these zones. For years, the zone that was supposed to come second, simply known as R2, was a complete mystery. However, over time, developers have come out and spoken on the topic, saying at one point it was known as Dubious Depths, and at another time known as Ridicule Route. Weirdly enough, in the ending animation, we can see Sonic running through this area, and it's odd as every other part of the ending takes place in one of the final zones. And as I can see routes here, I guess it's safe to assume that this was supposed to be Ridicule Route? Funnily enough, the remake also has cut stages. Desert Dazzle was supposed to be a reimagining of Sand Zone that was cut from Sonic 2, but this also ended up being cut from Sonic CD's remake. Luckily, it did eventually see the light of day as Mirage Saloon Zone in Sonic Mania, so it's a happy ending for this one. Final Fever Zone was pitched as an expansion to the ending of Sonic CD, for those who collected all the time stones, and while some may complain that it wouldn't be faithful, fuck that, this game's final stage could have really done with some sprucing up. Anyway, enough about the stuff that didn't make it. Should we talk about what did? Sonic CD is built on Sonic 1 as we mentioned earlier, but unlike Sonic 2, which chose to focus on improving the speed and platforming elements of Sonic, CD attempts to build on exploration. Don't get me wrong, Sonic CD's levels still have plenty of high-speed moments and places take advantage of momentum, but just going through the levels is nowhere near as satisfying as in Sonic 2. That game felt like a roller coaster, with stages that rewarded you for playing well with constant speed. There was still exploration for special stages and finding those best routes, but you could get into such a flow state. Playing Sonic CD like this will result in a very shallow experience in my opinion. While these levels have plenty to them, especially vertically, they aren't very long or challenging if you just go from left to right. The stages do have gimmicks to set them apart for sure, but A lot of them aren't very fun. Before that, I wanted to go very briefly into the control. Sonic CD may be more Sonic 1 than 2, but it did incorporate the spin dash. Except, well, this ain't the one. What's the whole point of the spin dash? An instant burst of speed to take an immediate advantage of slopes. Here, it doesn't work like that. You have to start revving up and wait for the screen to pan to the right. Then you can let go. It only takes an extra second, true, but in that second, it loses so much of what makes the spin dash special. There's nothing worse than going to rev up and letting go, expecting Sonic to go flying, only for him to just uncurl. It's so unsatisfying. I'm guessing Sonic Team of Japan were asleep during the meeting when this concept was introduced. However, there is an alternative, as this game introduced the super peel out. By pressing up and spamming the jump button, Sonic's legs spin into a figure 8, and you can rocket off faster than a spin dash would ever allow. It's super fast, but leaves you completely vulnerable after being used. But, as it can be activated quicker, I just use this and immediately press down to roll, keeping myself safe from colliding with an enemy. There are no new power-ups once again, so Sonic as usual is fun to play as. But these stages, let's just say they aren't winning any awards. Palm Tree Panic is like a more chaotic Green Hill Zone visually, but it really doesn't have much that sets it apart from the other zones. Collision Chaos has some pinball gimmicks mixed in, which mostly just means bouncing off things you can't see coming pretty uncontrollably. The rooms with the bubbles to bounce on always ends up sending me backwards, and this gets annoying very fast. Tidal Tempest isn't much of a water level, as if you keep running, you'll easily avoid drowning, assuming you don't get rocketed out of the water by an invisible current anyway. Quartz Quadrant has these pathways that you can swap the direction of, either letting you gain a lot of speed or slowing you down tremendously. That's about it really, not a bad stage, but nothing remarkable. I can't say the same for Wacky Workbench, however, which is one of the most annoying stages in the entire series. The whole idea is that the floor is electric, but instead of damaging you, it sends you flying into the air upon contact. The areas it sends you into are a pain in the arse to get back down from, and if you fall back to the floor you'll just get launched again. It's so fucking annoying. Not a fun level. Stardust Speedway is like Sonic CD's version of Chemical Plant, though once again I feel they missed the mark. The background detail in this level is amazing, but when moving at high speeds it gets very visually overwhelming very fast. I mean Jesus, what's even going on here? The level design is also confusing and will often send you in loops. It doesn't feel like a roller coaster, it's more akin to a seizure. Metallic Madness, the final stage, is alright actually. It's fairly challenging and has some pretty memorable stage gimmicks, like these lasers that can turn you mini. Cute. Exploring this level can be a bit of a pain, but we'll come back to that. So yeah, the stages just aren't that exciting when played normally. And this is reason numero uno why I didn't like this game at first. As I couldn't ever get the good ending, I always ended up just going through the stages normally, and it was lame compared to the other entries. There wasn't enough to it for me to see why the game was so beloved. The bosses are fucking lame as well. I mean, every single one of these guys goes down with no problem. I do like how they try and make a couple of them a bit more strategic, like we have to run on the treadmill to grind down Eggman's machine here, but for the most part these bosses go down in a couple of seconds. The first boss, oh my god, I've never seen an easier Eggman contraption to take down, and the final boss is such an anti-climax. I mean, I can kind of get by with the other bosses not being that great, but the final one? This was such a letdown the first time I got here. But hey, there is more to this game than my younger self could see. Sonic CD is all about the exploration. While these stages may not have much that makes them stand on their own, each and every stage is very vertical with hidden areas galore. But you may notice while exploring that there are some areas that make no sense, as well as rings in places you couldn't possibly reach. And you may also have noticed the past and future signs all over the place. Well, taking a note from Marty McFly and his whip, Sonic can travel to either the past or the future of each and every stage by passing the corresponding signpost and running at top speed consistently for a few seconds. The past is devoid of technology and Robotnik's influence is barely noticeable, whereas the future is a dystopian nightmare where Robotnik got what he wanted and took over the world. This feels like a good time to bring up the plot of Sonic CD. So the game begins with the series' first animated intro, and I love it, I love it, I love it. The style and personality of Sonic is perfect, 100% right on the first attempt. Good job, guys. Most may be used to the cleaner version included in the remakes, but I still think the original looks good, and I bet this was mind-blowing back in the day. Anyway, the cutscene shows Sonic rushing towards Neverlake, where a special place known as Little Planet is set to make its annual appearance. I'm not sure why it only shows up once every so often, but hey, it's magical, so why not? Upon arriving, he sees that Robotnik has chained down an entire fucking planet, which, I'll be honest, is so goddamn impressive that I've got more respect for the man than disdain. Robotnik plans to transform Little Planet into a mechanical fortress, and is using the power of the 7 time stones that are kept in some pretty crazy places on Little Planet. I don't know where the hell these locations are, but book me a flight, these places are cool. Anyway, by using the time stones to go back in time and set up robot generators, Robotnik was able to take over in the present and dominate the future. So Sonic, of course, springs into action to save Little Planet. But little does Sonic know that he's being watched by Amy Rose, a pink hedgehog who immediately falls in love with Sonic at first sight. Yeah, Amy debuted here with a classic design that I'm so happy Sonic Origins is finally putting to use. Only 30 years too late, right? Amy follows Sonic to Little Planet, which is able to catch up with Sonic and go gaga for a bit. However, she is soon captured by another newcomer, Metal Sonic, one of Robotnik's most iconic creations who makes one hell of a debut, smashing through spikes to capture Amy out of nowhere and taking Sonic head-on in a race. Before smashing headfirst into a wall, I guess Robotnik forgot to install the brakes. So it's up to Sonic to rescue Amy and save the future of Little Planet, travelling through time to destroy the generators in the past and knocking Robotnik's face in at the end. It's the most story and gameplay been integrated thus far, and for a game released in 1993, it's a really impressive feat. Everything you do in Sonic CD has consequences, as you can simply just pass and act as normal, or you can change the future in a zone, where the end text will exclaim, "Sonic made a good future." It is a constant driving force of the game, and is in my opinion, the best thing about it. But it's not perfect, let me tell you. So to get the best ending in Sonic CD, you have to ensure a good future in every act of every zone. We're back to having 3 acts per zone, but Act 3 doesn't require any time travelling. Instead, it simply hosts the boss and is always set in the future. Depending on your actions in the previous 2 acts, it will either be a dire wasteland if you failed to break the generators, or a glorious utopia if you succeeded. And I really like that you see the results of your actions in every zone, instead of just in the ending. But okay, the act of creating a good future is the main part of this game, and there are a couple of steps to it. You start off in the present in every act, and as previously mentioned, you need to pass a past or future sign and then keep the speed up in order to time travel. And this is reason 2 I didn't like Sonic CD back in the day. The act of travelling in time can be a huge pain in the ass. When you've reached the required speed to make the jump, Sonic will begin to leave a glowing trail. Now if you slow down, it'll vanish, but the game is nice enough to grant a bit of a grace period in which you can start the attempt again. If the past or future sign in the bottom of the screen starts flashing, that's how you know you're going to lose your chance and have to start over by finding a new sign, assuming there's any left of the one you want. Now you can reset by either dying or restarting the stage in the remake, but it's rarely this which is the problem. Sometimes when you're doing an amazing job of keeping the speed up, the game will just decide, nope, and cancel your attempt, especially in the original. This is so fucking annoying, and it's way more frequent than it should be, as finding an ideal location to keep moving is way more difficult than it might seem. Your best bet is to find places where you can just bounce between 2 springs or get sent in a loop. Areas that are clearly dedicated to time traveling. But you would be amazed how much easier it is to jump to the future than the past, which isn't helpful because, from a gameplay point of view, there's very little reason to go to the future initially. There are more enemies, more hazards, and no robot generators to break, meaning, yes, this is completely pointless to do unless you like seeing every potential version of each zone. This also means that you'll have to travel back to the present before, once again, attempting to travel to the past, and this can get annoying very quickly. If you do successfully travel to the past, this is where step 2 begins, the hunt for the robot generator. Towards the start of the adventure, they are relatively easy to find if you have a good knack for exploration in a Sonic game. You know, the usual stuff, incline spin dash jump, sticking to the higher paths, etc. For the most part, following these rules will result in you smashing these with little to no issue. However, later in the game, they can get pretty fucking tricky to find, the wacky workbench one being the prime example. So, you have to stand underneath this instant kill hazard, which turns out isn't a hazard and will instead push you into a pipe and lead you to a generator. That's just genius design, isn't it? Honestly, give the person who made that a raise. The later generators can be tricky, and again it's why I used to dislike this part of the game, because you can't miss any if you want to get the best ending this way. So as cool as all of this is on paper, it can get repetitive, as in every act you have to find a past sign, find a way to successfully travel to the past, find the robot generator, and then actually finish the stage. It's interesting, but it can also be a pace breaker. However, to Sonic CD's credit, there is another option if this doesn't tickle your fancy. Just like in Sonic 1, finishing a stage with 50 rings will allow you to enter the special stage for a chance to snag one of the 7 time stones. I'm not sure why the checkpoint entrances were dropped, as considering there's 7 stones to collect and only 12 attempts to get them. Failing a special stage can be a huge problem, especially when these special stages can be a real piss take. So the scenario is you control Sonic in these open 3D areas where you must smash all the UFOs to collect time stones. Super ambitious for the time, but good god, look at this performance in the original. The remaster smooths things out, which makes the stages overall easier, but not by that much, let me tell you. Sonic's control isn't great, and the UFOs are extremely erratic despite there being a set pattern. The amount of times you'd line yourself up, make the jump, and fuck, you totally miss, is infuriating. You're also on a time limit, which goes down extra fast if you touch the water, so the whole thing can get pretty stressful, even when the extra UFO appears when you're running out of time. Hitting this one will refill your clock a little bit, and it does respawn, so that is nice. Doesn't stop these stages from sucking, and yes, you guessed it, this was reason 3 I didn't like the game, because getting the time stones just felt impossible. Gonna once again plug Sonic Origins here because yes, you can retry special stages here at the cost of 1 coin. I don't even really need the safety net now, but but I know my younger self would have been much happier if he had this. So after collecting all the time stones, the future will automatically be saved, and you can just progress to the end and get the good ending no issue. Which is rewarding for sure, but the time stones don't give you Super Sonic or anything. So compared to Sonic 2 or even smashing generators, it just doesn't feel satisfying.
So I didn't like the stages, the time traveling, the hunt for the generators, or the special stages. You can probably see why younger me didn't like this game very much, huh? And considering I'm still critical of these things now, you may be wondering how I even enjoy this game. Well, follow me.
When you put it all together, it works. I don't know why, but it does. When I play Sonic CD, I always go for the best ending, but my method of doing this involves a bit of everything. I always smash all of the early game generators while collecting the time stones on the side. If I manage to get all the stones, then great, I can just play the rest of the game and bask in the glory of the good future. If not, I just keep smashing generators until I get all the stones. This lets me explore the different time zones without getting too sick of the whole gimmick. If I want to, sometimes I'll travel to the future to see what I've achieved, but normally seeing it in Act 3 is enough for me. I play the game in a very specific way that suits me, but it's great that you have the choices of how to do it. In that way, Sonic CD is very replayable, and I think the amount of choice you have here makes it stand out from the other 16-bit entries. So after rescuing Amy and defeating Robotnik, Sonic escapes from the base as it crumbles, carrying Amy all the way out and putting her down before creeping away so she can't follow him again. I absolutely love the animation there, Sonic taking swiping left to the next level. If you manage to achieve the good ending, Little Planet is able to escape its chain and floats off, somehow thanking Sonic. I didn't know a whole planet was capable of doing that. After that, we get a nice little montage of the adventure. Super charming, I must say, and it ends the game on a great note, especially in the Western version where a much more somber version of Sonic Boom plays us out. Okay, that's enough of a segue. Can I talk about the music, please? So, Sonic CD actually has two soundtracks, US and Japanese. Now, the Gems Collection gave us the American soundtrack, so this was the one I knew for a long time. And I liked it. It's good. In fact, I think it deserves more credit than it gets, especially for the fact it brought us Sonic Boom, one of Sonic's most iconic pieces of music. The thing is, it's just completely overshadowed by the Japanese soundtrack because, oh my god guys, you want to know another reason I kept coming back to try the game? This soundtrack. I'm not even kidding. It's fucking perfect. It's got the right amount of energy and snaz. It's catchy and there isn't a single bad song in the whole list. The main theme, Toot Toot Sonic Warrior, isn't quite Sonic Boom if you ask me, but that's the only song I find inferior. Here's just a sample of some of my favourites. The game also looks fantastic. There's a few times where it gets a little crazy with the details, but the colours have never been so bright before and some of the effects make the game stand out on its visuals alone. The sprites for Sonic are a bit of a downgrade from Sonic 2, in fact these are just ripped from the first game, but they have some cool effects that weren't possible before, so you win some, you lose some. This was all enhanced in the remake, which, let's be real here, is the only way to play this game. You can choose your soundtrack at will, and the intros and endings are cleaned up and look amazing. Plus the new cutscenes added in Sonic Origins are great. And you can even play as Tails, who I'd argue suits this game more due to how vertical the levels are. Being able to fly is just a blessing, isn't it? When Origins Plus comes out, it'll be interesting to see what the game looks like with Knuckles, not to mention rescuing Amy, as Amy. This has been a fun video to make. Sonic CD is not just a game I could breeze past because there's so much to talk about it to me. But I'm glad that nowadays I end up liking this one a lot. It might not be a perfect game, but you can tell there was a lot of love put into it. I mean, did you know this game has voice acting? If you don't touch the controller for 3 minutes without pausing, Sonic will say, "I'm out of here," and you get a game over. That's brilliant. There's lots of little images hidden in the sound test, some making me wonder if the developers were having a bit of a breakdown while making this.
Anyway, maybe I'll be having a breakdown next time. I'm starting my look at another new franchise, and it's one that's quite relevant at the moment. Yep, we're going to be looking at the first Legend of Zelda, so join me for that next time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out some of my others. We'll be looking at more Sonic, more Mario, Resident Evil, Silent Hill. There still isn't really a theme to this, is there? But, you know, we just keep moving. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.